Call the meeting to order, and I'm going to slightly change the order because I'm hoping more colleagues arrive in the next few minutes. So I would like to begin with the introduction since we're moving to an item that requires a vote. Let me start first with the introduction of new faculty members and call upon the provost for that. So we'll start with item 4.
I'll do this one from the podium. So thank you, President Knapp, and again, good afternoon to everybody. It's my pleasure to formally introduce our new members of our community, our new faculty members here at George Washington University. I've had the opportunity, as has President Knapp, to meet many of these young scholars, young teachers, and they are an extraordinary group. This year, close to 100 scholars from top-ranked institutions around the globe have entered the George Washington University community. So new faculty, for those of you who are out there, of course, welcome. We've had many opportunities to welcome you. Some of you have been to my house for reception. Many of you have gone to orientation. And we can't tell you how pleased we are to have you join us here at George Washington University. We have a tradition, and for those of you who are new to the university, we ask each of you to rise, and something you'll see actually in many events, we do this by school, where your faculty appointment is, and something that I was unaware of when I first arrived, and asked, well, how did they pick the order of the schools to call? Those of you who've been here a long time, much longer than I have, sort of know the answer to that question, we hope, which is it's in the order in which your school was founded, from oldest to youngest. So many times, including at commencement, you'll see that used. We'll use it here. So I'll just call your school's names, and if you are affiliated with that school, if you could just please rise and be acknowledged by the rest of us. So I'll start out with our oldest school, the school which we founded, which is the Columbian College of Arts and Sciences. And if any faculty are here from there, please rise. The School of Medicine and Health Sciences. Do you have any colleagues from there? The George Washington Law School. The School of Engineering and Applied Science. The Graduate School of Education and Human Development. Anyone here? Yeah. The School of Business. The Elliott School of International Affairs. The School of Public Health and Health Services. The College of Professional Studies. Anyone here from CPS? And pop quiz, the last one, and those of you who have been keeping track, it is our newest school, the School of Nursing. So thank you. I'm sure everyone's already sort of deep into a productive year. We all look forward to getting to know you better as your careers go on here at GW. And now it's my pleasure to invite President Knapp to the podium for brief remarks.
Well, actually what I'll do next is the approval of the minutes so we're going back to the beginning of the agenda. So I'd like to see if there are any objections to the minutes or corrections to the minutes of the Faculty Assembly meeting held last year on October 4th, 2011. Are those accepted as presented? Thank you. And then I have the pleasure of calling on Professor Castleberry to present a resolution to amend the faculty organization plan.
Thank you, President Knapp. Good afternoon, everyone. The resolution that was submitted with the agenda is a reorganization, not a reorganization, a recalibration of the seats in the Faculty Senate. This happens whenever we create a new school. It happens when we increase seats in the school. A school has to have more than one senator because you can only serve a term of 2 consecutive years on the executive, 3 consecutive years on the executive committee, and there has to be a representative of each school. So we did 2 different things. There was a concern in the Senate that there needed to be more equitable representation on the part of some of the larger schools, that the current allocation is a little bit out of balance. And so what we did is we submitted through PEAF a task of really looking at this. They studied it, they brought something back to the Senate. It was discussed and debated in the Senate and approved by the Senate that the faculty members of the Senate would be elected and from the following schools of Columbian with these allocations of seats. For the Columbian College of Arts and Sciences, 11 seats. The Graduate School of Education and Human Development, 3 seats. Engineering and Applied Science, 4 seats. The School of Business, 5 seats. School of Medicine, Health Sciences, 5 seats. The Law School, 4 seats. The Elliott School of International Affairs, 3 seats. And the School of Public Health and Health Services, 3 seats. And our baby school, the School of Nursing, they only get 2 seats for right now, but they will eventually get up to 3 seats too, which was sort of the standard when the Faculty Senate was first convened some 60 years ago. It then describes the different roles. You have all this in the resolution that's attached to the agenda, and then there are 2 other primary kind of things. That this is a change in the faculty organization plan. That's why it has to come before the Faculty Senate, and it has to come before, go to the administration, and it has to come before this group because it is a change in the organization plan. That upon approval by the Faculty Assembly, the President is then requested to forward the proposed amendments to the Faculty Organization Plan for approval by the Board of Trustees. If we can do that today, we will be able to present that to the Board at its October meeting, which means that we could then make these changes for the 2013-2014 academic year. That was also contained within the resolution.
Thank you very much, Professor Castleberry. Because this is coming to the Assembly as a petition from the Faculty Senate, there is no need for a second. This counts as a motion on the floor for discussion. So discussion is open on the Faculty Senate organization plan. Is there any discussion? Any questions? We prepared to vote? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I think the ayes have it. Thank you, Professor Castleberry. I will now call upon myself for my remarks. Well, let me start out by saying, in recent years, I've been giving a kind of State of the Union university kind of message at this time of the year. We're going to forego that this year because we have something very important to focus on, which is the strategic plan that will guide us through the rest of this decade leading into our 3rd century as a university. And I just want to set the stage for that a little bit. I will say it's been an exciting year so far for a lot of reasons. This is the first time that we intentionally had our freshman convocation coincide with the Freshman Day of Service. Last year we were forced to do that by the hurricane, which actually fizzled a little bit, but we thought there was going to be a hurricane that was going to wash out the convocation, so we canceled that, and we ended up postponing it until it coincided with the Freshman Day of Service. And then we discovered that actually having that combination of introducing our students to the academic life of the university as we parade in our medieval regalia, and then going from that into a service activity shared by all of our entering freshmen, became a very meaningful way of introducing students to 2 very salient aspects of this university and its traditions, going all the way back to the founding vision of George Washington, which was to create a university that would bring students together to study together in the nation's capital and form them into a core citizen leadership. All right, so that's been our sort of vision as an institution, and I think we've now have found a powerful way of introducing new students to that. So we actually, at the day of the convocation, we had 2,400 students fan out all across the District of Columbia. They went to 14 schools, a number of different parks. They were painting and sweeping and cleaning up debris and so on. And I think it was a great introduction to the university for those students. On that same weekend, we hosted an event that was put together by the Milken Institute, which was called a Celebration of Science, that brought 1,200 leaders of science and government and nonprofit organizations and the philanthropic community to our campus on a Friday, and then again on a Sunday, and Saturday they went up to the National Institutes of Health, and the purpose of it was to really make the case for the importance to the economy as well as to the welfare of the nation and the world of continuing to invest in science, particularly with an emphasis on the life sciences. We had Nobel laureates here from James Watson on down. We had the head of the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation, many of the other institutes. In fact, on this stage, The opening event was a joint interview of Magic Johnson and Dr. Tony Fauci. Tony Fauci, of course, is the head of the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Disease, and is an expert that many of you have seen, I think, in the media because of his expertise on HIV/AIDS, and Magic Johnson as an AIDS victim who nevertheless has turned that into an extraordinary engagement and leadership role. We're both on here on stage together, and that kicked off this 3-day event. So it was really quite an extraordinary event. About a week after that, we had the Opportunity Nation take place in the Lisner Auditorium. This brings together 240 organizations that are trying to look at ways of increasing opportunities for citizens moving up into the middle class. And so there's been a great deal going on really across the university, and nothing symbolizes that level of activity more than the many cranes that you see around here. If I were giving you a full dress version of the state of the university, I'd probably take you through all those. Suffice it to say, we've got 5 construction projects underway. For those who are new to the university, one important thing to say about that is, we went through a period of building residence halls as part of a 20-year campus plan that we began to implement several years ago. We've now moved from the residence halls to the academic buildings. The largest project is the science engineering project, which is going across the street from, if you're new to the university, you've seen that very large chasm there, which is the excavation for Science and Engineering Hall. That's a gross square feet, about a 500,000 square foot building, which will contain engineering and science departments, as well as having 2 floors that are just shelled out so that research can grow into them as we identify new projects. It's going to be, as I'm fond of saying, by far the largest science and engineering building 6 blocks from the White House that's ever likely to be there. And we have a new home for the School of Public Health. We're about to break ground on the University Museum just down the street from here. There's a parking garage next to Tonic Restaurant, Quigley's, on which we will be building a new academic. We just finished the garage and just topped that off, and now we're going to be building a new, at some point, a new academic facility, which will probably be either an extension of the law school or possibly of Columbia College. We haven't exactly decided that. There's some shifting around of dominoes that will guide that decision. And then we are also building on our Science and Technology campus in Virginia, in Ashburn, Virginia, a state-of-the-art conservation facility which will house some of the collection that will be in the museum and also give our students opportunity to do the kind of studying that is very relevant to our museum studies program, our Asian studies, fine arts and art history. So there's a lot going on across various academic disciplines with a strong emphasis on interdisciplinary opportunities in all these facilities that we're putting up. But I think one of the important milestones that we're reaching this year is the development of this new strategic plan. We haven't done one in over a decade, and we really took an approach to this one that was a little different from what sometimes happens when universities produce strategic plans. We decided not to spend 2 or 3 years working on this, because what happens when you do that is you get sort of an inventory of everything that's going on in the university. We really wanted to have a more focused exercise, and so we decided to do this within a single academic year, culminating in a retreat with the Board of Trustees that took place this past June to give them an opportunity to provide feedback on some of the events and some of the ideas, rather, that were being developed in the course of this planning process, and then bring it to this assembly today, and then to the Board of Trustees for a final look on October 19th. And I want to say a little bit about that plan. We really are trying to build a plan that will have the kind of vision implicit in it that will help give us a sense of where we're really going as an institution, but also will provide a kind of pathway for bringing in the resources that we need to accomplish that, to make that vision a reality, and tell us a little bit about how we can make targeted investments of both time and energy, as well as our financial resources as we move the university forward. We think this plan, as we're designing it, will help the George Washington University grow into an even more productive, innovative, and highly recognized university with an even greater contribution that we can make to addressing some of those pressing challenges in the nation and the world. And I have to say I give a lot of credit to Provost Lerman. You're going to hear from him in just a moment. He's going to outline some of the themes and concepts and even some examples from the plan, which is still being drafted. But I think he has led really extraordinary, thorough process in reaching out across all constituents of the university and in integrating the advice and the feedback that he received from all those, and he and his team received from all those events. Actually, there were more than 70 meetings and other kinds of events with what we like to call stakeholder groups. That's the current terminology for this kind of process. And input was gathered from using public forums, luncheons, retreats, town halls, working groups. We reached out to students, parents, faculty, staff, department chairs, deans, the Board of Trustees, and alumni. And I think the result is a still developing but very rich document, still in its draft form, that identifies goals and values and connects them explicitly to the most pressing challenges facing us as a society, and suggests ways to really bring about the programs and the goals that it recommends. And so I think that implementing the plan is going to involve, I think, everyone in the university, and we're looking for feedback as we do this. We expect this to be a living document. We don't expect anything we're doing in this plan to be set in stone. It really is laying out parameters and themes that I think will be helpful in guiding us. But we know that as we move potentially into a campaign, we're still exploring the possibility of launching a major comprehensive philanthropic campaign. We know that new priorities will emerge, and some of them will be within the parameters that we're talking about in the plan, and some of them will be things that haven't even occurred to us. So the idea is not to use this as a straitjacket, but really to guide our progress forward. I would like to thank the chairs of the 4 working groups that the Provost's office organized to lead this effort. Dean Doug Guthrie of the George Washington School of Business led the working group on globalization. Sarah Rosenbaum, professor of health policy and of health service management and leadership from the School of Public Health and Health Services, led the group on governance and policy. Brian Richmond, associate professor of anthropology in the Columbian College, led the group on innovation through interdisciplinary collaboration. And finally, Dr. Terry Reed, the vice provost for diversity and inclusion, led the group on citizenship and leadership. And it's now my pleasure to turn the podium over to Provost Lerman to give you a little bit more detail about how this plan has developed. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, President Knapp. In addition, the steering committee included the 4 people who chaired the working groups, and 3 other people served on the steering committee. I'd also like to make sure we acknowledge them. Not lose my pen. Process. Forrest Maltzman, who is the senior vice provost for academic planning, was on it. Scheherazade Raymond, a faculty member in the School of Business, and Cheryl Reed, the head of our institutional research, also served on the steering committee. All those folks endured my early schedule, so meetings tended to start a little earlier than most people would prefer to be here, so I greatly appreciate their attendance at the weekly meetings. This plan, which is now a little over 12 months in the making, is something that I think has been an incredibly enlightening process for those who have had the opportunity to participate in it. It's taught us a lot about our university. It's made us think very hard about our priorities and our resources, our comparative strengths and our comparative weaknesses, and what would constitute a plan that could move GW forward. As President Knapp noted, it's been about a decade since our last strategic plan, and I would characterize the last strategic plan about making investments in creating what I will characterize more colloquially as building great parts of the university. So what it did was made strategic investments in what ultimately was 22 areas in which GW already had some strength or aspired to have it, and made financial investments in making those units stronger. This plan, by contrast, I think now takes advantage of the progress that was made. For the most part, the last plan did what it was supposed to do. Those units in which we made investments did become stronger. And while it's always hard to link the causality clearly and unambiguously, as in I invest in A got better, therefore the investment worked, I think it's safe to say that there were many parts that we invested in over the last decade that might not have been as strong as they are today were it not for the strategic plan of that time. This plan, we decided, would be all about making of the parts of the university something that's more than the sum of those parts, about building greatness for the university around a common shared set of themes, a common shared vision that leverages the great aspects the university has created over the last 190 years of its history. And so it has a very different feel. It's less about invest in Department A or Center B, and much more about what are the thematic areas that cut across our schools, departments, centers, and institutes, and how can we bring faculty and students and other people together around those themes so as to move the university to being a truly great world-class research institution in the fields that we have chosen to be great at. We started the process with what we came to call strategic visioning, not our term. Actually, Eric Spiegel, who's the CEO of Siemens USA, actually, as far as we know, coined it. And we basically looked at two different things. And many of you heard this speech, so I'll go through it quickly, part of the speech, which is, what are the trends globally that we have to position, globally and locally and nationally, that we have to position the university to be effective within? The world just doesn't stay still. And you don't build a plan for today's world, you build a plan for the world as best you can envision it when the plan is mature. And we went through a whole series of trends we thought were likely to continue and that were likely to affect the position of higher education in general and GW in particular. So trends such as the shifting demographics of the American population and the global population, in which America is moving to become more southern than northern. It's moving to become more diverse in its ethnic and racial background. And the number of 18 to 22-year-olds, the traditional undergraduates, who we draw here, is actually going to be declining over time. Other good examples are resource constraints, such as the growing emphasis on shortages of or limitations to growth around what are sustainable economic practices and business practices, issues of governance, issues of the cost of higher education, and shifts in technology, which are enabling brand new modalities of teaching and learning, and how the university ought to be using those. We then turn to our strengths and limitations. What are we good at? And what are either we not good at or where we face externally imposed constraints. Things we decided we're good at, or things that are sort of natural endowments for us. We have strong programs around public policy, not just in the Trachtenberg School of Public Policy, but throughout the institution. We have programs focusing on policy in every single school in one way, shape, or form. We have a number of outstanding schools, partly that were created through the investments of the last strategic plan that bring strength to the university. We have made strong capital investments, and I think that's been enabled by the fact that our financial management, particularly through the Great Recession starting in 2008, was just extraordinarily good. And we were able to make commitments to faculty and to buildings at a time when many universities were facing retrenchment. And then we have a student body and a faculty which is disproportionately engaged in questions of how we make a difference in the world. Our students are disproportionately inclined to volunteer for things. For schools our size, we have the highest participation of the Peace Corps. One of the most common jobs of our students leaving undergraduate studies is to teach for America or the Peace Corps. We have a student body and an inclination towards thinking about how what we do in the classroom can be translated into things for the betterment of humankind. And our students are disproportionately engaged in politics and internships. They're engaged in the Hill. And part of that is driven by yet another asset, which is our location. GW in a cornfield in Kansas is not GW in Washington, D.C. The same people, the same buildings, the same facilities, the same students, if transplanted, isn't GW. Our location is part of our identity. It's part of our strategic assets. And we need to pick those things to going forward that actually make use of that as an asset. Limitations. We are not an unconstrained university. We are not, by most universities, and certainly those we compete with, a wealthy university. Our endowment, although in absolute dollars sounds like a large number, is actually quite modest. And the best metric of that is the percentage of our operating budget which comes from endowment income is quite small compared to many of our peers. We are, not only is our endowment not large, but our student body is large. And so we are a relatively large university with, relatively speaking, for our peer group, a small endowment. We have externally imposed restrictions. We have a cap on the number of students as part of our campus master plan. We agreed with the District of Columbia to cap the number of students here in Foggy Bottom and the number of students at Mount Vernon campus. And we live within those caps. So we cannot grow our student body in unrestricted ways, particularly in those two campuses. And so we have some limitations to the options available to us. We can't grow our undergraduate body or our graduate body here. And in fact, it's a trade-off. If we grow one, we have to shrink the other on Foggy Bottom, certainly. And then we have some issues with infrastructure. We grew very fast. This capital plant is heavily strained. We use it extremely intensively. We turn over our dorms. We use our classrooms more hours than many other universities use them. We are space constrained in many ways, and many of our business systems were designed for a smaller university that was less research intensive. And we are working hard to catch up in that. President Knapp talked about some of the major capital investments we're making. But that's a process, I would argue, is still playing catch up with the real needs of a university of our scale and our stature. So what comes out of that thematically? How can we think about themes around which we can unite our activities? And this conversation went on for multiple months. Many of the discussions and forums we held were precisely around these questions, around what thematically can link us. And ultimately, we came up with four thematic areas that we think, if invested in, can link together many of our strengths and play to those strengths. And so the four themes, which have been around at least 6 months in the planning process, so one of them is globalization and internationalization. The world is becoming more international and global. GW, to be a great university, cannot be simply a national institution. It must be a national and global institution. And that translates into many concrete ways. The truth is, right now, we disproportionately not only draw from the United States, particularly for our undergraduate population, but we draw from sub-regions. We are actually drawing most of our students from 5 or 6 states. So we have to be both a fully national institution and recruit our students from the entire nation, but maybe more importantly, be a global institution. Now, how does that translate? Well, one action we are putting in the plan is that we ought to increase the number of international students here at GW. Right now, about 6% of our undergraduates are international. Probably we ought to be doubling that. And that's an example of translating a theme into a concrete action. And the plan, which you'll eventually get probably on Friday or Monday in draft form for further comment, calls for those sort of increases in international students. A second theme builds on a strength I already talked about, which is emphasizing education and research in the areas of governance and policy. Not, of course, to the exclusion of everything else a great university does. But the truth is, every one of our 10 schools that I mentioned earlier has some strength in those areas. We need to bring those strengths together in ways that make it more visible, that make GW the university to come study for all those students who have profound interests in governance and policy questions. And those can be governance questions in the normal sense of that word, which are governance in terms of legislative bodies and executive bodies, but it can also be corporate governance, for example, in our business school. The third theme is, and we've changed the names of this so many times that many of you lost track of been following this, but what we're now calling innovation through cross-disciplinary collaboration. And the underlying hypothesis here is that the problems that most interest us and that are most important for our society disproportionately are problems that are never going to be solved through a single disciplinary perspective. And let me give you a concrete example, which we talked about a lot in our planning process. Let's pick one, healthcare. Problems of healthcare are economic problems, they're technological problems, they're social psychology problems, they're problems of organization and healthcare delivery in corporations. No one discipline is likely to have the silver bullet for solving the healthcare problem, because otherwise, frankly, we would have solved it already. In fact, the solutions to our nation's healthcare problems, and global healthcare problems for that matter, probably rest in bringing together people from many disciplines where we as a university have strength, and bringing them together and creating an environment in which they can easily and readily collaborate across disciplines to work on shared problems of interest. That's the great challenge. Universities historically aren't very good at this. Let's just take it. We built our university's strength from the disciplines upward. So we're organized into departments and schools that are discipline-centric. And there's no interest in changing that organization, because that's where our core strength is built from. But what we have to do is make it easier for people to work across those boundaries. We have to change incentive systems where the incentive systems are getting in the way. We have to encourage teaching across disciplines. We already have some great examples underway. Concretely, let me talk about one of them, which is the sustainability minor, this is the first year that minor is in effect. The core foundational course, which is led by Lisa Benton Short, is taught by 5 faculty from 5 different schools. We don't do that enough. And in fact, the budget model that we have and the incentives we have in place actively, well, they don't have to say they actively discourage it, but they certainly don't reward that sort of activity. How do we make more of that happen while still preserving the strength in the disciplines? And then the fourth area is one which we're calling citizenship and leadership. And we mean that in a very broad way. And it really harkens back to Washington's original vision for this university, which was a place that educated the next generation of citizens and leaders. How do we inculcate in our students an understanding of their responsibilities and their rights as citizens of multiple levels? How do we teach them the skills to lead effectively in diverse settings as the country becomes diverse and, more importantly, the nation becomes more diverse and the world becomes more diverse? How do you lead in organizations in which many of the people are not quite like you in many different ways? And how do you create environments where everyone can function to their full potential? On the research side, or on the other side, we as a GW, we are a citizen too. We're a citizen of the District of Columbia, we're a citizen of the country. How do we exercise those responsibilities effectively and to the betterment of the area in which our university is located? So those are sort of questions and action that we've been contemplating. That has led us to a set of objectives and actions. And I can't go through all of them. And as I said, we'll post the draft online, and we'll have mechanisms for all of you to comment. But let me give you some sampling. I've already given a few of them, but I thought it would be useful to give you some additional thoughts about some of the things that we're calling for as concrete actions in this plan. The last strategic plan did not emphasize the need to grow the faculty. Virtually no new faculty lines were created in the last strategic plan, and I assume that was a conscious choice. There were other priorities. In this plan, we're calling for hiring between 50 and 100 additional faculty, but not just at random, of course. We're looking for faculty who have a strong disciplinary base, but in addition, have a passion for and an abiding interest in working across disciplines. And so we're going to be creating, over the life of this plan, 50 to 100 new permanent tenure crewing faculty lines that will be across the 10 schools in terms of home bases, but these will be faculty who have an abiding interest in participating in one of the interdisciplinary research areas that we're going to be funding. The second thing we think we need to do is increase the amount of and the quality of the funding for graduate and postdoctoral students, particularly as the competition for the best students grows. And I think this is put in a more vernacular. When one aspires to play in the big leagues, sometimes you have to put in resources that make that attractive to students to come here. Our stipends have been set too low for a period of time. Maybe they were right at the time they were set, but they have stayed too low, they haven't risen. So we need to improve the quality of our graduate support and also the number of packages we have out there. As we continue to grow our research base, we will be continuing to attract more students who need support for their research. The creation of cross-disciplinary research centers. Research and, in fact, in some cases, centers that also have educational programs. I already talked about sustainability. In the last year, we have launched a sustainability initiative. We have launched the Global Women's Institute, and we have just launched the Computational Biology Institute. These are institutes mostly created under the leadership of Vice President Leo Chalupa that bring together faculty to work on shared problems, but who come from different disciplinary backgrounds. We think we need to do a limited number of these. And when I say limited, it means that each one of these needs to have the resources to be successful. And so doing 50 of them dilutes the resources to the point where no one of them can succeed. And so we have to choose wisely. And we think we need anywhere from 4 to 8 more of these funded and spinning up over the life of this plan. And we have to choose those areas wisely. And then a topic that has had enormous discussion in the various forums I've held, and probably the one that I would say about half the conversations I've had are about. Today, we admit our undergraduate students by school. That is, a student is a Columbian College student, a student is an Elliott School student. We think that that has led to a lack of agreement amongst the faculty as a whole around what the core competencies of every GW graduate ought to be. There is no shared understanding. Each school has its own major requirements and school requirements. Many of them are great requirements, by the way, and it is not to say that some of them are not absolutely the right things to be teaching. But we lack a university-wide vision for our school, for our university. So we're calling for a faculty process to get started with involvement from the Faculty Senate Executive Committee, the Faculty Senate as a whole, and creating a working group to do really two big things. First is to begin thinking deeply, and I know this isn't the first time this university has undertaken this, about are there a set of core things every student should be able to do and every student should know? And if so, should that be a core shared by all the students, independent of which school they're majoring in? And the second is, should we give our students greater flexibility by admitting them to the university as a whole, rather than to a particular school? For those of you who have never read our bulletin recently, today it's extraordinarily complicated for a student who wants to either double major across schools, with some rare exceptions, particularly the Elliott School and the Columbia College have worked this out quite well, actually. But if a student wants to double major in philosophy and accounting, that turns out to be very difficult in our environment. And there's no intellectually good reason for it, other than the fact that we admit our students to schools and we do budgeting by schools. There are a set of majors you can take with other majors, a set of minors you can't take with other majors. We need to sort of begin from ground zero and say, why? Why do we do that? And will we have a stronger university and a university with a more integrated identity if, in fact, we simply admit our students to the university, and then at some point, of course, they will choose majors and take most of their courses in those majors. And that will link to the question of, well, if we have that, what should every student know? What type of course or courses should they be taking? So this is sort of an exciting adventure. I don't know, and I don't think it's actually the provost's role, to know what should that core be. That is essentially a faculty governance question. What I do know is we need to engage in that conversation and think through, is there a potential for an agreement around a core set of educational goals for our students that we can then implement over the time period of this plan. And lastly, let me talk about resources. The last plan was a little silent on that. We have identified the set of resources, and it's a range of resources. And I'll tell you why it's a range. When you read it, we'll make this a little clearer. The resources needed to undertake this plan really falls in a range. There's a set of resources over the life of this plan that we know we can get with reasonable certainty. These are funds either that I can move in my office. There are new funds that we know we're going to get from fairly reliable sources, particularly the Innovation Task Force work to date. These are monies that one can look at an account, put it in there, and expect to be able to expend over the life of the plan. And we think there, over the 10-year life of this plan, that's somewhere north of $100 million of expendable money. We also believe, however, that many of the ideas in this plan will resonate with potential donors. And so there's a component of the budget for this plan, beyond the original that base of a little over $100 million, that we believe is raisable. But of course, you can't commit those monies till you have them. The development office has been actively engaged in looking at this plan and has willing to put some stakes in the ground around their targets for raising. And we think we can raise at least twice the $100 million for the goals aligned with this plan. So everything here has a range, and that's why when I talk about 50 to 100 faculty, for example, that's the single most expensive part of the plan, there's a range. It's not 50 or 100, it's 50 to 100, because the 50 are things we know we can do with resources we can have or will have, and the next 50 depend on the success of our ability to raise money for things like endowed chairs or expendable money. Each of the elements of the plan, the actions in the plan, and there's many of them, as you'll see when you read it, also has a range. And again, that range doesn't reflect so much of our uncertainty about how much things will really cost, because we sort of know more or less how much a typical faculty member costs us, but simply reflects the uncertainty about whether we'll be able to raise additional money beyond a base for those activities. So, timeline. As President Knapp said, this plan is coming around. The draft plan will be posted on a website off the Provost website, provost.gwu.edu, and then there'll be a link off that to the draft plan. We welcome your comments and feedback. You can do that electronically. There's a web form. You can do that anonymously or public comments. You can write to us. anyone on the steering committee, or just write to me, and that's like the simpler way with any thoughts or comments you have. We'll be continuing to hold a set of discussions and forums. The 70 meetings we've held to date are just part of a series. We'll do at least one major town hall. I'm hosting at my house something I'm calling Dinner and Dialogue. Some of you may have been there to one of them, in which we talk about the strategic plan over what I hope is a good dinner. We've done a series of lunches, and we're continuing them. Virtually every department chair has been invited to come to a lunch with 6 or 7 of his or her peers for a conversation with me and Forrest Maltzman about the plan. We'll be continuing those. We're going to continue to look for as many ways to engage in discussion over this plan. Of course, the trustees will see it in about 2 weeks. The plan will be finalized over this semester. As we get input from you and others, we'll continue to modify the ideas in the plan and edit the plan. It will eventually go back to the Board of Trustees for its February meeting as a final version for their final comments. So this has been an amazing experience. It's been something that I think has come forth with a set of intellectually exciting ideas that have the opportunity to really propel this university forward. Obviously, the goal of the plan isn't a plan. The goal of the plan is to do something from the plan. And so the ultimate test of whether this is been an effective use of our time in doing this plan will be in what we do and what the outcomes of those actions are. And so we're about to engage in a pretty exciting period in which we will be making major investments over the next decade around the themes of the plan. So with that, thank you very much. And
so let me say, I think we have microphones in the audience for questions. If you would please await a microphone if you're interested in asking a question or making a comment, because we need to get that on tape for the minutes. And by the way, Steve, did you say when the draft you expect to be online?
Either Friday or Monday.
Okay, so
that is at the end of this week or early next.
Maybe we should send a little alert when we think it's out there so that people will know that it's time, so they don't have to look for it before it's ready to be found.
Yep, I will send an email to all faculty.
Great, that's perfect.
Just announcing it.
So there are microphones, I believe. Who has a microphone? Yes, okay. And would anyone care to make a comment or ask a question of the provost while we're still on this topic? Well, if there are no questions, applause. Thanks very much. I'd now like to call on Professor Michael Castleberry for the report of the Faculty Senate Chair.
Good afternoon again. On behalf of the Faculty Senate, I would like to make this report, and I'll try to be brief. We are in the 6th decade of a unique experiment in shared governance at the George Washington University, and it seems to be going pretty well. It means that there is a degree of discourse and collaboration between the Board of Trustees, the administration, and the faculty on most matters. And it focuses a lot of the work on the work of the committees of the Faculty Senate and the work of the Executive Committee of the Faculty Senate. And there, if you don't know exactly how it works, there are regular monthly Senate meetings where the president presides and then he and the provost attend. There are also monthly meetings with the president and the provost with the executive committee as well. The degree of dialogue and discourse and argument and throwing things at each other and everything like that we do in all these meetings is a part of probably what is propelling this university forward to a plan to really just see how far we can go, how high we can rise, and how quickly we can do it. Some of the work that we did last year, there were 2 resolutions. One was you have to learn to speak in numbers. One was Resolution 11-1, which amended the faculty organization plan to provide representation for the School of Nursing on the Faculty Senate and on the Faculty Senate Executive Committee. We'll continue to be proud of our new School of Nursing. We will mention this every single time we can do it. And that was adopted by the board, approved by the administration, and it was approved by the Board of Trustees at its meeting in October 2011. There was Resolution 11-2 to amend the faculty organization plan to clarify the allocation of seats for the schools of the Faculty Senate. We don't need to talk about it anymore because that was approved by the Senate, it was approved by the administration, it was approved by you, and then that will also go to the board, and it will then be integrated into a revitalized faculty organization plan. In addition, there was a resolution to endorse amendments to the George Washington University on conflicts of interest and commitment for faculty and investigators. That was considered and adopted at the first meeting of the 2/12/13 Senate session on May 11th. Because there was an August deadline for changes to this policy following adoption by the Senate, the resolution was forwarded to the administration along with resolutions for the 11-12 session. The administration approved the resolution, and changes to the policy were approved at the May 2012 meeting of the Board of Trustees. One of the things that we do in the Faculty Senate is that we have an opportunity to invite people to come in and present and talk to us. For example, Executive Vice President and Treasurer Lou Katz describes as the peak experiences of his life, the opportunity to come and address the Senate. Deans are invited. They seem to enjoy the experience, and they give as good as they get. We've had many people next year. I won't give you a long list, but we had the new athletic director. We had the new director of human resources, Sabrina Ellis. We invite these people to come in so that we can engage in discourse, and it's usually on matters in which we are all currently interested. So what would bring a dean in or what would bring an administrative official in would be something that is really going on, in which we're trying to slowly educate people before we get into decision making. It's a part of the process that we think works very, very well for us. Beginning last February, we were briefed on proposed changes to the university's sexual harassment policy and the corresponding procedures. In March, there was an annual report on core indicators by the provost, which we hear every 2 years, a report on development activities from Director of Development Morseberger. These are the kinds of things where we invite people to come in and talk to us. Another matter that we deal with that's a serious one is we hear grievances. There is a grievance that was heard during the 11-12 season. It is close to completion, but it was not completed over the summer and is being carried over into this year. There were also non-concurrences. Non-concurrences when, according to the faculty code, there's a disagreement between the sending department in a tenure promotion decision and any administrative officer of the university. When that occurs, non-concurrence is heard by the executive committee, not in an appeals situation, but in an attempt to resolve the disagreement or the differences. When that can't happen, the matter is remanded back to the sending department, and there still exists a final appeal either to the Board of Trustees or to the president of the university. There were 3 administrative non-concurrences with faculty recommendations in tenure promotion cases, 2 in the School of Business and 1 in Columbian College. The executive committee reviewed these cases in the summer and made recommendations on each case. There was a 4th administrative non-concurrence that was initiated but was not formally transmitted to the executive committee until September. We are currently working on staffing that non-concurrence, and we will report that out. We give a record at all Senate meetings of any actions on a grievance or a non-concurrence that comes before the faculty. The non-concurrences that we heard in the summer consumed an inordinate amount of time of the members of the executive committee, and there was a lot of discussion about the nature of the non-concurrences that we were hearing then. And from that, I want to give you not anything to do with those particular cases, but I want to give you the sentiment of the executive committee on this matter, and it responds in a way to the provost's comments about where we see ourselves going and how we're going to get there. And President Knapp's comments when he addressed the new faculty, a very impressive group of people. All 3 of us get the opportunity in August to meet these people at Mount Vernon. I've been impressed in the 3 groups that I have met over the past 3 years. They indeed are very impressive. The university's in good hands with these young professionals on board, and they fit right into the goals and directions we have in terms of higher achievement and research and scholarly activity on the part of all of us. We are in a period, though, of adjustment and expectations for how we're going to accomplish this move forward. And that means that there will continue to be concerns in elevating standards of performance in according with these aspirations that we have, as well as in the context of the policies and procedures of schools and of departments as they relate to promotion and tenure kind of issues. The guidelines for promotion and tenure in the school and the department are those that are in existence when a new faculty member is hired. The expectation is, if you're not familiar for some of the new people, is you are hired, you have a time frame of about 4 years where you get to determine what it is you want to do to impress the university with your talents and gifts. Then a decision is made by a department committee, by a school APT committee, appointment, promotion, tenure committee. It goes to the dean, and it would go to the provost. And absent a non-concurrence, there would be it would be approved. The faculty code is very specific that there has to be a compelling reason not to agree with the department of origin. The sentiment of the faculty code is that those are the people who know the content best, they know the individual best. So a non-concurrence usually has to support a compelling reason not to go forward. In a period of change, the executive committee wants to share with schools and deans and departments and everyone in the university community that the opportunity exists to begin to institute changes for which we have not yet communicated completely to all the component individuals who might be in the pipeline for this, or we may be making decisions that don't have the consent and approval of the members of the faculties. For example, an ATP committee could overreach in some kind of way. A dean could initiate a different kind of yardstick for the evaluation of something that was not presented in any way, shape, or form, so that anyone knew that that was a requirement or a part of the defining criteria. We do not see these things at this point in time as problems, but we are aware that during a time of change, we have to be very vigilant to ensure that these people who have come in with all these gifts and who are working to demonstrate their capacity to the members of the university community are given a fair opportunity to do exactly that. What the executive committee has asked, and this was brought up and is in the minutes of the last Senate meeting, and I want it on the record in the faculty assembly as well, is we're asking for an engagement at the department and the school level with APT committee members and with deans to discuss the ways in which they see themselves conducting the fairest and most equitable as well as challenging criteria that we can possibly have for the people that we want to hold on to and maintain in the university community. Our feeling is without an open discussion and without engagement on this topic, that the issue related to non-concurrences would be more about maybe confusion between some of the policies as opposed to like an understanding of what those policies and things are. All right, so we're encouraging everyone to go back to your schools. Hopefully your senators heard this in the Senate meeting. We'll have a record that you heard it here. But we would like for every member of the faculty to take this very seriously and to see that your school engages in this so that people are involved in the dialogue. This is not only a dialogue that affects all members of the faculty, it's a dialogue that particularly affects these wonderful, talented young people that we're bringing in to the university. This is not an attempt in any way to micromanage that tenure and promotion process for someone. That is indeed the responsibility of the candidate who puts themselves forward. That's why you hire bright, talented, gifted people. That's their job. But then our job is to explain what the process is, how the process works, and to ensure that the process is uniformly viewed by those people so that we hopefully don't find ourselves with a lot of non-concurrences arguing about compelling reasons. This is not something that I want to spend my summer doing. I'm sure President Knapp doesn't want to hear about it. The provost doesn't want to have to read about it. We would like to find an equitable way to make sure that we are all on something of the same page, even in a time period where we are changing our policies and procedures and our guidelines and our criteria and elevating the standards. No one is opposed to elevating the standards. I don't think there are any faculty who believe that that's not a good thing to do. All right, I don't think you'll get too much agreement for that. This is my third year in this role. You won't be seeing me next year because in my capacity, I can only serve 3 years, and my 3 years are up as chair of the executive committee. So you'll have a new person to listen to. But I will tell you something that I have said at the end of each of the 3 speeches that I've been privileged to give to this group. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to serve the university and to serve the members of the faculty in this particular endeavor. We don't have probably enough people in the university who want to give up all the things that you have to give up to be able to do it, and so therefore you get people like me instead of people who could really do a really good job at it. But that's the way it goes. I'm hoping that at some point in time it will entice some of you to consider service in the Senate. I can't tell you what a value there is for the, administrators to be able to listen to faculty, for faculty to be able to listen to administrators and plan in a cooperative kind of way in this time of change. It's a very rewarding process, and I'm full of admiration for all the people who are involved. I want to mention just one other kind of thing. When the Department of Education changed the rules a little over a year ago and notified colleges and universities in the United States that their sexual harassment policies were out of whack, Terry Reid went to work and has been working ever since on trying to do that. And it was a wonderful example, I think, of the way in which the administration and the faculty collaborate and cooperate. The revisions were made. We sent our policy in, we dialogued with them, and they wrote back and all these other kind of things. You had to come up with a revised policy. That revised policy, though, all of a sudden had to be implemented by a certain date. And we didn't find that out until the summer, in which case there's no way for the faculty to make a decision in the summer. Under the faculty code, the executive committee of the Senate is empowered to act for the faculty of the university in the interregnum when the university is not in session, with subsequent approval at the first meeting of the Senate after that. After discussions with the provost and Vice Provost Reid, we approved an interim sexual harassment policy. That policy met the criteria of the U.S. Department of Education. We are in compliance. That policy was also approved at the first meeting of this year, and now we are in the process of evaluating that policy that we've just approved as an interim policy to see whether we can maybe strengthen it or make it better and go beyond what the U.S. Office of Education is really calling for. That is the kind of collaboration I think we like to see in the university. It's the kind of thing we believe in, and that's the best example I can give you of the kind of cooperation and the kind of respect that exists at the university at this day and time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Professor Castleberry. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our agenda today. I did want to repeat, start where we started today, which was to welcome the new colleagues, and to complete that process of welcoming them, we are actually having a reception for everyone upstairs in the lobby of the Brady Gallery, just above us, and look forward to joining you up there in a few minutes. If we have a motion to adjourn. Any objection? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.